Yeah, by the way, Miss Battaglia is my daughter. I know almost everyone on the committee. I'm sorry to see Senators Berry and Coloma. I hope they come back. I've worked with them on numerous bills. And of course, I have a student, I won't mention who is my student, who's on the committee. And I think know my story. Of course, all of you are sitting here, and with any trial, much less an argument, we know. I mean, I teach, and we know that the person that gets to open, the person that gets to make the argument has it easy. All they have to do is convince you of their position. The person that has to come back, the defendant, so in a case, has a much bigger task, because not only do they have to convince you of their position, but they have to unconvince you, if that's a word, of the other side. So that's, I think, where we are right now after the testimony that's been given. Just quickly, because most of you know me, but you know me in different roles, in different ways that I've been here and that I've worked with all of you in different ways. Credential-wise, I am a law professor at Southern University. I teach criminal law and procedure, among other things, and have for 26 years. I'm also on the Law Institute on the Criminal Law and Procedure Committee. I also am a former member of the Indigent Defense Board, which I was on for 6 or 7 years, a number of years back, in which I left to be on the task force to reorganize the Indigent Defense Board 10 or so years ago. So I have worked on both sides. I've also represented the state in a death penalty case that went to our state Supreme Court, and it is one of those cases that when the conviction was upheld and the death penalty was set aside to be redetermined in a new trial, and we agreed with the defense to leave that as a life sentence instead of the death penalty. But I really, although I'm going to come to you professional and with my background in that, I would just also mention that I wrote the bench book, or helped write the bench book that all of the judges use in capital trials today. I've also written the materials used to teach the course I created, which is called Anatomy of a Murder Trial. And I teach the judges through the Judicial College every single year about all the criminal recent developments, but death penalty in particular, and I've done that for probably 20 years now. So every year for 20 years, I read every single death penalty case, both here in the state and at the national level with the Supreme Court. All of that being said, and I will come back around to that, really what I'm here for today is as a survivor and family member of murder. Had an attempted murder by my former husband on me, and survived that with my daughter being 2 at the time. Literally fled in the middle of the night to come back to Louisiana, the only way I could have been safe. I've certainly felt, as I can't remember now, someone said, if that person came up to me today, I would shoot him. And I know that because I spent 3 days in the hospital and 2 days in a hotel with my parents after this happened to me. And the next thing I did the next day, especially after running into him in a grocery store because he was still free, and him threatening my 8-year-old son at that time, was buy a gun, and carried it with me for years. I couldn't sleep by myself for many, many months. In fact, until I moved back to Louisiana. This all happened in Dallas, Texas. So I have been a survivor of an attempted murder. And the victim didn't get too many consequences from that, to be honest. Unfortunately, because maybe if it had been taken care of at that time, the more heinous crime would not have been committed. We did move on with our lives here in Louisiana, and he remarried. I'm sorry, it's going to be hard for us. He remarried, but continued with his domestic violence. He had 2 little girls with his second wife, whose name was Mary Jean Pearl. When those little girls were 6 and 9, to get back at their mother, he brought them to his loft in Dallas. He had the oldest little girl, Faith, call her mother on the phone and put her on a speakerphone. And while the mother listened on the speakerphone, and while Faith, the 9-year-old, asked her not to file charges against her daddy, and then when Mary Jean said stop, John, please don't do this to the girls, she heard Faith say, my daughter's sisters, Faith say, don't, Daddy, don't, please don't. And the next thing the mother heard were the shots. And she listened and then screamed, run, girls, run. And the younger girl, the 6-year-old, ran. We know because her body was found feet from the door to try to get away from her father, who, while the mother listened, shot both of the girls with one gun in the back, severing their spinal cord so they couldn't run any further, and then got a second gun and went up to each of them, put the gun to their head, and shot them through the head. He then, over the speakerphone, said, Merry effing Christmas, Mary Jean, and left and went and met up, locked the door so no one could get in, then went to a bar. Went and took some drugs, picked up a girlfriend, went to a bar, left a big tip, went next door and had 2 roses tattooed on his arm for the girls in barbed wire. He also called the answering machine at his ex-wife's home and left a long message that was played at his trial where he said very creepily, girls, I know you're in a better place now that you don't have to have anything to do with your effing mother. He was apprehended later that night. The mother called me really in the middle of it before she had even gotten up to see the girls because she had to get there and call the police. She thought of us and was concerned that he may have left to come down to Louisiana to try to kill the 2 of us. If I'd been able to pull up the videotape, there has, there's been a book written about this and the girls' last statements. It's in its 2nd edition now, required reading in my view, for anyone that is in a domestic violence situation. And by the way, I didn't mention I'm also on the board of the local domestic violence center, or just recently resigned from that. So we've lived through that. Christie was 15 at the time, and these were her little sisters, 9 and 6, and her father who committed the crime. So she's going to, if she can, if she wants to, she of course has a choice, but she wanted to be here today. She has a very unique perspective because she lost her 2 sisters to a murder. So she's a family of 2 victims. But it's also her father who today sits on death row in Dallas, Texas, in Huntsville, which we're still waiting on. Last year, in March, his execution date had been set, and the 2 of us literally sat on my bed in my bedroom waiting for his execution at 6 that night. We learned through Facebook, because we had friends in Dallas, that the execution had been stayed. We just lived through this last year. The execution was stayed because he is now trying to say that he's incompetent to be executed. So for the last year, we went back to the trial court, and I'm going to email each of you this video clip because it's really something you need to see. He went back into the trial court with a hearing and a sanity commission, and had 4 psychiatrists, 3 of whom said, yeah, we think he's incompetent. He's now trying after 16, it's been 16 years. Next week. It'll be the anniversary of the girls' deaths and of the trial next week, 16 years. 15 years since the trial. He's trying to say now he's not even sure that he really killed the girls. And this happened about 2 years ago. He started to take that position. And maybe he's being set up and he really doesn't have a memory of it and things like that. 3 of the psychiatrists said they thought he had some, I'm trying to think what they called it, that people were against him, out to get him, syndrome of some kind. One of the psychiatrists who the court had appointed and who has worked in prisons for many years, said, oh, he's just making all this up. He's very smart. A documentary was made of this, which was shown in Canada last night. So for the documentary, he was interviewed 2 weeks before his execution date and about 3 or 4 weeks after the execution date, and was very clear. You could very clearly see. And one of the things that I wanted to was shown in this little trailer clip. The documentarian asked him about what he did to me and did he have any regrets of what he had done to me. And he said, yeah, that I didn't kill her. She's a pain in the butt. Now, he's sitting on death row in Texas right now. If he were on death row here in Louisiana, I would be facing that this man who still, after 30 years when we were married, 20 years, 16 years after killing these 2 girls, the main thing he's thinking of right now is getting out to kill me. And I lived with that for all the years between when it happened, when he attempted to kill me, until he was put in prison, and that felt freedom for the first time then. What you guys are doing, and not only this legislation, but the probation and parole legislation, at least as it was filed, is also consider giving parole to lifers. So should his sentence, if you get rid of the death penalty, he would get a life sentence. And now under your proposed legislation, he would get out. And I would have to continue to be, and she would have to continue to be victimized by that, because that's the alternative that you're offering. Everyone, no matter how horrible their crime, will be given a life sentence. And if the probation and parole recommendations made by the task force go through, those people will be up for parole. And if the parole board's decision last November in that Alexandria case is an example of that, released after what they did. I'm going to let her talk. I think she's at a point where she can talk now a little bit about how it feels to be a family member of little girls that were killed, and also how it feels to have your father on death row for all this time.
Thank you, Ms. Ghetti. Ms. Battaglia, and take as much time as you need.
First, for all the other family members of victims in here, I do, as you were saying before, some of you don't know what it feels like. I do. I can speak for the family members of the victims. But I'm also in the unique position that I'm the family member of the offender as well. There are always those 2 sides. They're not usually the same. And I will tell you, from 2002, everything happened in May of 2001, and as my mom said, the trial was in 2002. So from when he was convicted and sentenced till middle of last March, when he was about to be executed, I would have been testifying on the other side. I could not, I totally agree with I don't understand how we're going to tell people not to kill people by killing someone. That totally made sense in my head. Then I started learning about other aspects of that it's not so black and white. Yes, killing the offender does not bring closure to the family. There is no closure. Nothing is going to bring back faith and liberty. What I got closure, if you want to call it that, when I forgave him. A lot of people don't understand how I could do that. It took a long time. It's probably about 4 years ago. And as other Christians will tell you, forgiveness is for yourself, not for the other person. I've never said to him, I forgive you. I don't know if he knows I forgive him. I don't know if he knows I'm mad at him. But I did that on my own. What he did still hurts me. I'm sad every day. I will never see my little sisters, aside from that aspect of it, he took himself away from me. His choices, he made that decision to also leave me without a father. And the mental anguish of being a teenager with your dad on death row. But like I said, I forgave him for what he did. I still love my dad. He is my dad. A lot of people don't understand that. I don't think I could ever explain why I do. My stepmom, Faith and Liberty's mom, actually told my mom she wanted to have nothing to do with me anymore. We kept a relationship after everything happened. I went to visit her. I was going to go to college at SMU and live with her. A few weeks after I went to visit, she told my mom she didn't want anything to do with me anymore because I still loved my dad. So that there is that part of me that I love my dad, and the thought of him being executed kills me inside. I would never wish that on anyone. I mean, those of you who are a family of victims, compound that. I can't even describe it. I have, for 16 years, prayed that he would die in prison of anything before they could execute him. However, I am confident that if he had the chance to not be in prison anymore, then I probably wouldn't be here. Because, like my mom said, I'm not a parent, but for those of you who are, he knew that the worst way to hurt Mary Jean wasn't to kill Mary Jean, it was to take away the girls. I know, like my mom said, they've been apart for 30 years. That he's been in prison for 16. And all he wants to do is hurt her still. I am positive. I've been to visit him. I am positive that his hatred for her tops his love for me. He sent me this was my Christmas card. He sent me this past Christmas that said, I hope you are having a merry and fun holiday and not wasting any more of your time and karma trying to do your old dad in. That only puts you on Santa's naughty list. Time to get on the nice list. If not, then just go to law school and assure yourself a place in hell for all eternity. Referring to my mom being a lawyer. Either way, I still love you and always will. That is why I saved you from your mother and why I named you Christie. And then, a little PS part, make sure you go to Christmas services too. Making you a Catholic was the only end of the deal your mom kept. So keep up the faith. Faith is written in all caps and underlined, as that was one of the names of my sisters. Like she said, they did this documentary, and when the director asks him when he thinks back on the time when he put my mom in the hospital 30 years ago, what does he think? And my dad's response was, well, it makes me think I should have killed her. So, yes, some people change. I do agree that being in prison, some people turn their lives around. But that means fix the system, not the end result. And a lot of people say the system doesn't work. That I agree. There are people that are wrongly convicted. Any of the multiple reasons that anti-death penalty people are arguing that way. Fix the system. Don't fix the reason they're wrongly getting put on death row in the first place. There are people that don't change. Like I said, if the death penalty didn't exist, if he were gonna get life without parole, but then somebody changes it to being able to get parole, I'd be living in fear. I was just thinking, I have a neuromuscular disease. There is no treatment, no cure, so I currently participate in drug trials. If they were to ever find a drug that was a treatment for what I have, but it had side effects, I would take the drug and figure out how to deal with the side effects, not say, I don't want to deal with it. You fix the in-between if the end result helps.
Thank you, Ms. Battaglia.